Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Babylon Cast. As always, I'm your host, Vincent Freeman, joined by an illustrious guest, another returned person. He's Colin Moriarty. He's the owner of Last Stand Media and the co-owner of the Limo Games. And of course, he's the host of the largest PlayStation podcast, Sacred Symbols. And Last Stand Media is also where you can find other great podcasts such as Constellation, Knockback, and Defining Duke. Mr. Moriarty, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me. Appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. I actually haven't been on Twitter much recently, but yeah, great. It's honestly been one of the best things that I've ever done is just stay away from Twitter. I noticed that you changed your handle, though, to Long Island Viper.
Yeah.
How long ago did you change that? I didn't even notice.
Just a few days ago, actually. Literally, just a few days ago. Yeah. So I was no taxation since 2009, and I got verified in 2012. So if you change your name when you're verified, you just lose your verification tag. So to ensure that it was actually going to happen, because I really don't care about losing my verification, but to be perfectly honest, it kind of feels a little liberating, actually, and I probably never deserved it to begin with. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to, cut off my nose to spite my face, and they're going to be like, oh, and a week later, everyone gets their check marks back, and then that hurts me, my brand or whatever. So I waited until they all got shut off. I've been waiting forever, and then I deployed a Long Island Viper name change on PSN, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, like everywhere. And that's kind of been the move for a while, and I was glad people hadn't taken the name. I even thought about going to TikTok and getting it, but I was like, I'm never going to use TikTok. So, but yeah, so it's no taxation was a reference to no taxation without representation, and I understand why people thought it was just no taxation straight up, which is not something I really feel. So, and haven't really ever felt in my life. So it was a long time coming, like 14 years in coming. So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So you didn't change it just because I know, like you've said previously on the podcast, that as you get older, you're becoming like more and more populist, less as staunchly conservative or fiscally conservative as you were before. Would basically that kind of teetering away from staunch conservatism be the reason also why you're kind of?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, my love of American history is just, and the founders and the founding and the revolution is just as deep as it was. So I'm not really scared off. See, I think first of all, more people are becoming right wing. Some people are becoming left wing. But I think that a lot of people are becoming. I'm not becoming more left wing economically in spite of my right wing leanings. It just seems to be kind of materially true that the rich are too rich. That there's just too much money lubricating the system, too much money in politics. Taxes are probably not high enough on the very rich. There really shouldn't even be people that are able to accumulate billions and tens of billions and hundreds of billions of dollars. It's an insane amount of money. And so that's kind of what drew out the populism in me more than anything. But yeah, just getting away. I just don't like politics online very much. It's funny because we're talking about this now, but just like the general interface of politics, like what it courts, kind of like the A to B reactions on Twitter. I think you've done a really nice job or a really smart job, I should say, of not going on Twitter. I haven't posted on Twitter from a personal standpoint in almost 2 years, but I just post my content, and I still find it a very useful newsfeed, although less so these days with the checkmark kind of chaos. But I do like what Elon Musk did with the checkmarks. I don't know that it was probably the best idea for the company or the lucrative nature of, or the potential lucrative nature of Twitter, but to make it more egalitarian, I think is actually pretty cool. Like, why the fuck did I have a checkmark? Because I had 150,000 people or whatever following me about video games. What does that make me? And then you'd see some nobody from a local news channel with 200 followers also get the check mark. And I'm like, well, what does this really mean? So, yeah, I mean, that's a long-winded way of saying I just needed to change no taxation. And actually, integrally, I needed to change Moriarty-IGN on PSN. Yeah. I haven't worked at IGN since 2014, and I finally changed it 9 years later. Mm-hmm. Although I was only able to do so in the last few years. So now it's all unified, which is nice.
No, that's good. That's good. Yeah, but... it's funny. I've also kind of been steered away a bit also from the hardcore politics talk online. I know that that's what you kind of initially started Colin's Last Stand as. And then, we talked about this on the last podcast that we did, that you just, because of how toxic the kind of cultural conversations are online, you've also kind of teetered away from that a bit. But I think as of late, you've been returning back to it a bit more, would you say?
Yeah, I think that well, let me back up. I think due to the nature of political happenstances in regards to the field that we cover, which is gaming and entertainment, I feel like it's vital to talk about it right now. Mm-hmm. So we don't talk about Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I mean, like, we don't talk about the partisan politics, but we talk about China. We talk about Saudi Arabia. We talk about tariffs and trade. We talk about commissions and mergers and acquisitions, and so that's kind of where, and of course the very political nature of games. Games are political, and I've always said that, and I always believe that the creation of games is political, the publishing of games is political, selling a game is political, and the game doesn't have to have a political message, but a lot of games do. I mean, I just wrote a children's game basically that has a political message, in Super Perils of Baking, and so I just feel like it's important to be able to kind of openly analyze that, but you don't have to be partisan, and you don't have to shoehorn it in anywhere, which I think a lot of people try to do, and so I'm not interested in Aloy kissing a girl or like any of this other stuff that's going on in video games, where people just have more of these social stances, whether it's about pride or gay or transsexual or trans issues or whatever. It's like, that's interesting to a degree, but that was only interesting to us on the show because of the J.K. Rowling stuff, which was only interesting to us because of Hogwarts Legacy. So you kind of have to create a patchwork. If you can't get back on the web to where you were, then you're probably talking about politics for no reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, hopefully today's conversation isn't going to be as explosive as talking about why Far Cry 5 didn't have, wasn't a message against Donald Trump. So hopefully this one will be a lot better. But the reason I'm actually really excited to talk to you about religion and religion's impact on culture is because it was your episode on the Game Over Greggy show about religion that was a long, long time ago, back in 2014, I want to say. That was kind of one of the first videos that I saw when I was leaving my faith. I was raised Catholic, and I wouldn't say I was devout, but I was very obsessed with wanting to believe it was true, just because I was horrified of death. And to this day, death is something that I'm still scared of. And I remember that conversation that you had with Greg Miller at the time.
Are you actively scared of death, like right now? Seriously, I mean, I'm trying to.
Yeah, not that I'm gonna get assassinated, but just the fear of missing out on life and seeing how fast time is going by.
So you're not afraid of the act. You're not afraid of the after. You're afraid of missing out on the.
I'm afraid of missing out. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Especially seeing how fast time is going by. Like I just turned 26 recently, which I know I'm still relatively young. But Jesus Christ, is time going by really quickly.
It's only going to get worse, dude. I mean, they really say that it accelerates the older you get, and I'm 38, and it's true. I mean, the fact that we're almost we're like, what, more than a third of the way through this year is like, whoa.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think I had a professor that told me, I don't know if this is true, I've never verified it, but I've repeated this ad nauseum, that by the time you're 21, you will have experienced the same amount of life by the time between you're 21 and like 75. Just because of how fast time accelerates as you get older.
That's so interesting. I believe it, dude. My life, like in college and before that, feels like a phantom memory. Mm-hmm. As if like I don't. It's like, did that even happen? Yeah. You 26. You have so much life ahead of you. It's so exciting because now you're really starting to get into your own. Now you're really starting to discover yourself and get yourself moored. And it's a very, dude. My 20s were fun. Yeah. I mean, I worked hard, but they were great. And yeah, good.
I was just gonna say, like. Yeah, your 20s. Like, how like, does that feel like that was just a couple of years ago at this point? Or
yeah, it does. I mean, when I think I turned 30 my last months at IGN, so 2014, and I'm about to turn 40 next year. Leading up to the election next year, I'll turn 40, and my brother turns 50 this December. I mean, there's a lot of things. My parents are in their early 70s. It's you don't think about it like in the moment, but you kind of reflect backwards. And what I'm afraid of, and maybe it's been accelerated by my marijuana use, but I doubt it because I kind of just talk about this with a lot of people, is I'm like remembering less and less. Like to me, it's crazy that I'm like, what the fuck was my teacher's name in math in ninth grade? Like stuff like that. Like how could things you would never be able to think you could forget? Mm-hmm. Because in college, you can go back in your high school memories and rattle off your schedule basically. And now I'm like, I'm not even sure who I had when or where. And those little things like that to me, it makes me realize, first of all, there seems to be a finite amount of bandwidth inside your head and things you just lose. And then what I'm interested in is, like my sister on Instagram sent me this this random reel of like a cash register, like a children's cash register. And I grew up with my two older sisters, so I always played house in school and like very feminine kind of playing. And I had this cash register, and I was like, holy mother! I was like, this is the most nostalgic thing I've ever seen in my life. I haven't thought about this thing or seen it, and then there it is, and you remember it. So it's somewhere inside your head. But I think that it's like a tree growing, I think, and the tree gets wider on the edges and it kind of widens out and it gets further and further from its core. And maybe the data and the information is still there, but I'm starting to like not be able to grasp it as well. And it's a little weird. Like I don't know, man. I'll be interested to touch base with you when you turn in your 30s and you'll see how it feels. At the same time, I've never felt more physically strong or anything than I do right now. So it goes both ways, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where I'm thinking, like, if I'm this. Because everyone always talks about just how fast time is going by and how, everyone says like, oh, by the time I'm 80, that's good. But then when you get 80, you say, oh, I'd actually like another 10 years. And you keep like adding more years because at the end of the day, no one really wants to pass away. And it really just amazes me why there aren't more David Sinclairs trying to make sure that we basically stop the process of aging. I've always been surprised by that, given just how horrified we are of death. It really must be impossible, honestly. But,
yeah, I think about that, like I've listened to some of that stuff, not only with him, but with others, like I think it's the Massachusetts, the place that basically beheads people and puts the stuff in freezers. Do you know what I'm talking about? There's like 250, there's like a cryogenics lab with like very rich people where they basically have decapitated, like at the request of the person around the time they're dying. Like take their head, and they'll take their whole body too, but a lot of people don't want to do that because they don't think it'll be necessary in the future in order to revive them in the future. And I actually think that the anti-aging stuff is interesting, but I do believe that we are getting, you and I are both young enough, I think, that we will see the complete uploading of human consciousness to a machine, in which case I think that we're almost focusing on the wrong thing. Like I think we might be, especially me, but maybe you, a little late. But I do think death will become a choice at some point.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, as far as just uploading consciousness and having backups of yourself, I just think that seems vain enough to be humanly inevitable. And I would always, I saw these things always feel so sci-fi, right? But then I think about, do I even have it on me? Yeah. Like, then I think about this, and I'm holding out my iPhone. It's like, this didn't even exist 15 years ago. Like the concept of what this was, like wasn't a thing. You had your Blackberries and your flip phones and all of this, and now everything revolves around this. Everything. And so I just think that we're accelerating so quickly that who the hell knows. And of course, you have guys like Kurzweil and others saying that he actually moved the singularity up. I think he said the singularity was 2045, and I think he says 2040 now or something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and that also bumps into the question of, well, once this technology is available, who's going to be able to access it? And most likely, obviously, the upper class. How much longer until it's readily available to someone like us? Then that's going to be another question. So that's a good incentive to just try to get into the 1% just so we can get there.
Yeah, it's it is very dystopian to think about the potential possible uses of that, and kind of the very hospitable and generous nature of some of the people that used to create some of the world's most revolutionary medicines and all that, and kind of giving it away. I don't think it's even necessary, but I also think we're a long ways past that now. We're seeing the commoditization of that, like that weight loss drug. And I can't remember the name of it, Olympic or something like that, where it's a, I don't know if you've read anything about it. I actually saw 60 Minutes about it, and then I read about it more, where it's like a weight loss drug for diabetics, but it seems to just let everyone lose weight. And so like rich people are just having a run on it to the point where it's hard to find, and they'll pay for it out of pocket. And they have to take it like every month forever and all this kind of crazy shit. So you're already seeing the haves and have-nots. Like I do think obesity, for instance, will become more of a choice for the rich soon and things like that. So it is getting a little scary out there, almost a little cyberpunk. But yeah, and that brings up all sorts of spiritual questions too, and ethical and moral questions, and questions of consciousness and reality and time. So it's good shit. You definitely can't say we don't live in interesting times. Whether or not it's going to be the end of all things is is another thing entirely, but it is interesting.
Yeah. So on that note, I remember way back in the day, you labeled yourself a deist. I think back in the podcast Beyond days. And then afterwards, you would describe yourself as an atheist. And I think most recently I've heard you go back to being a deist. So what has your spiritual journey been like? And sort of what are your thoughts basically on, not religion in particular, but specifically like your own spiritual beliefs, I guess? What has been your journey and what do you currently believe?
Well, similar to what you were saying earlier about growing up Catholic and kind of the desire or the need or the want for God, I grew up Catholic too. My family's still devoutly Catholic. My parents and everyone. And that's not a huge surprise. I'm Italian and Irish, so Irish and Italian blood doesn't get much more Roman Catholic than that. And so I embrace, and as I've gotten older, I've embraced more and more like the traditions of Catholicism, like the cultural traditions, because I think I've tried to split it into multiple parts, like the historical or even anthropological nature of the church is its own thing. And I think that in and of itself is interesting. That I'm proud to be a cultural Catholic, and I guess is what I'm saying. Like, it's the original Christian church. There is no disputing that, right? And so it's kind of cool to have that long running tradition through all the councils of Nicaea and all, Constantinople and all these things all the way up to today, and have some sort of continuity. And I think that's kind of neat, but that's about as far as my spiritual or earthly appreciation of Catholicism goes. I think there's a lot wrong with Catholicism specifically, and I think it's a shrinking. I mean, depending on how you look at it, it is a shrinking religion, but certainly it's changing into a more like Hispanic and African religion, less of a Western religion as time goes on, more Asian as well, which is fine. But it's getting away from kind of the Western moorings that I think attract it to a lot of people. And I don't know that I'm any different. I kind of look at something like the Vatican as being, Vatican City as being this really ridiculous thing. Like, how much poverty could you cure by just getting rid of this place? Why do you need this place? But then you look at the traditions and, like I said, like old Rome and the Pontiff and all of these different things. So that, like, as far as the spiritual plane is concerned, that's about as far as it goes for me. And then I kind of ping pong between deism and atheism, because then I don't know that I would ever call myself an atheist anymore, just because I think atheism to me seems to have as much certitude in a faith that believing in a God does, because you believe something's not true. And I believe, a person of faith would believe something is true. And I think that what I realize, at least for myself, if I'm being intellectually honest with myself at times when I can think about this stuff, is I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I think that's agnosticism. But the reality is that deism, which I was really introduced to deism in college as an Enlightenment philosophy, because the founders a lot of them really believed in deist philosophy. So we read more about it, and I familiarized myself more with it, and I was attracted to it because the entire idea is to say, like, there seems to be something very clearly, there seems to be some sort of rule set. Could be a God, probably a passive God, maybe not omniscient in some way, but something. There's something that's keeping everything together, that creates the rules of gravity and electromagnetism and all the weird shit that funnels life and reality, time. And so deism just seems to be a more comfortable descriptor for me than atheist, just because atheist seems to be like the polar opposite of calling myself a Catholic. But I'm not really looking for the polar opposite, because I don't think there's everything wrong with Catholicism. I kind of want to, like, acknowledge that there might be something. And so my thought is that maybe there's some sort of spiritual or God-like figure in the universe. I think there's tons we don't understand about the universe, but what I'm pretty sure about is that he doesn't know or care about us. Mm-hmm. If it's a he or at all, I don't know. So I'm comfortable calling myself a deist, because I just think it keeps an open-ended philosophy of supernaturalism without really having to identify it. And that might be a cop-out in some way, but that's kind of how I feel. So it works for me.
Mm-hmm. No, I can sympathize with that. I think these definitions often are what gets sometimes people, like, confused about what the other person also believes. Like, for me, I'd describe myself as an atheist, but that description really only entails me not being convinced about any particular religious faith. So I don't actively argue that God does not exist or that any of the religions are false, but rather that I haven't been convinced that any of the religions are true enough for me to actively believe them. And so that to me is just as far as I go with that, atheist, without theism, basically. And I mean, for me, again, like I haven't really been within the atheist scene very much, right? the new atheist movement died a long time ago. But I've never really seen many people try to be pretty confident in their claims that, or with certitude, I should say. I've very rarely seen people say that they know for a fact God does not exist. And any of those people that do exist, I would think they're crazy. If you know for a fact that that you know he doesn't exist, I think you could say it's likely he doesn't, and I would say it's likely he doesn't. But at the very least, for me, I've always thought of agnosticism as someone who just isn't sure how to answer the question, whether that means because they don't think they have enough information or it's impossible to know with any level of certainty. And atheism for me would just simply be, well, I'm just not convinced. I don't believe because I'm not convinced. And that for me is really as far as it goes. But I agree with you that that word has been tainted a lot by certain actors. And it can also lead people to believe that they believe you believe certain things that you don't actually know, right? Like, I can't count the amount of times that I've had conversations with like staunch religious people that will say, like, well, how do you know God isn't real when you tell them that you're an atheist? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know at all, but I just don't believe. I haven't been convinced. Maybe you can convince me. But that's really as far as I go. I mean, using that definition, like, would you consider yourself one?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, my whole thing is that I look at the human experience, like what I feel like I know with some level of certitude is that God does not intervene in our lives here on earth. Because if he did, why is all of this like it just doesn't add up. The entire idea of suffering to believe and faith and martyrdom and all of that, that's very attractive to religious types, and I understand that, and it's cool in its own right about people dying for what they believe in and all of this, but to me, I just don't think it's that dramatic of a stance to say, like, why would a God let a child die of cancer? I know it's like a very trite thing, but like, why? Mm-hmm. Because that's part of God's plan. Why is God's plan to create a child and then kill him and devastate everyone around him? That's just, to me, that's the kind of like day-to-day stuff that never tracked with me with religion, which is what scared me away from it. And why I think that kind of the earthly concept of a God and how it all kind of comes from the same experience, and these religions all kind of sprout off of each other, especially in the particularly in the West. I just think it's obvious that there's no daily or minute by minute intervention in our lives, and if there is, that's kind of sad because it's very selective, and it causes a lot of pain and suffering, and the good don't always win, and the good die young, and bad people prosper, and all that. It's like, what is this? This is nonsense. It doesn't seem like Jesus came. I believe Jesus was real. I mean, I think it's obvious, but Jesus comes to earth in godly form and returns, and nothing changes about humankind at all. That's why the Bible is so, especially the New Testament, but of course the Old Testament as well, is like, it's so timely today because nothing has changed. So to me, I just feel like that's a demonstrable hole in religion for me, is that I don't see the intervention of God anywhere. If I look around in nature, you could see the intervention of God, but I don't know. I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's beautiful, but do I think that there could be a God on the other side of the fucking universe doing something else? Maybe. I don't know. And that's the whole point, is I just refuse to believe that God knows about us, cares about us, is watching. It's just nonsensical. It's what I've been talking about with the concept of heaven recently with, I think we talked about it on one of our shows on Last Stand, and I talked about it with my brother, where I'm like, what is heaven? If I was like, we all go to heaven, all the Moriartys go to heaven. So you're in my heaven, or am I in your heaven? Or am I a copy? Do I have any choice of being in your heaven? Like, what? How does that all work? It's just nonsense. Mm-hmm. And that's the date, like, kind of the more granular stuff that bothers me. But I don't. It sounds funny, but I don't hold it against anyone for believing that stuff. I can't even Pascal wager myself into that. Nonetheless, really believe it, and that's just me being honest with myself. Because the one thing I know is that if God is real, then God knows I'm faking it. So what's the point of even... I'll just try to live a good moralistic life. And if I see Peter at the fucking gates and I'm like, oh my God, here I am, then I'm going to be like, well, I lived a moralistic life. I didn't try to hurt anyone. I didn't try to do anything wrong or anything like that. So if the only thing keeping me out of here is because I didn't believe, that's ridiculous. And you can send me to purgatory or hell if you want, but that's ridiculous. My own dad thinks I'm going to purgatory, so.
Oh yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I'm sure my parents think I'm going to hell. But yeah, whenever I hear answers to the problem of suffering, or whenever I try to hear these very sophisticated theologians try to describe heaven and what exactly it is, it just sounds like world building, because it's so complicated and so complex, and it just sounds like they're building it from the bottom up, basically trying to make sense of it. But they're not getting this information from anywhere. They're just kind of creating it on the fly to try to make it make sense. It's like, well, okay, suffering exists because of free will. It's like, well, how can free will exist with an omniscient God? And it's just like they keep adding on to it. And at the end of the day, it just sounds man-made. It just sounds like you're really just kind of justifying it. You're not really explaining it. You're not leading yourself to a conclusion based on the data points. You're just kind of justifying it. You have your conclusion already, and you're justifying it basically by inserting data points that should make sense. And so, it's this sort of thinking that kind of leads me to really, at least in recent years, only focus, when I talk about religion with people, kind of focus on the societal implications of it. Is religion ultimately good for society? Would society be better off without religion? Do we need some sort of spiritual guidance? If there is no religion, will that God-shaped hole be filled with something else, with like certain, political aspirations, political ideologies? And I think these are all incredibly fascinating questions. And I've heard many people give their answers to some of these questions that I'm not particularly, convinced by. But I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this. So I think your general attitude, I know this is a very vague and broad question, but do you generally think, especially given the many different definitions of religions and the different religions that exist, do you think ultimately society, let's say, I guess, the West with Christianity, do you think it is ultimately good for the United States, to remain a predominantly Christian country?
I don't know. I think I'm glad you netted out Christianity, because this is one of the things we do talk about on our show as countries like Saudi Arabia grow in power and the gaming industry is like, I don't think Islam is good for the countries in which it dominates at all. I think a lot of that has to do with Islam is in desperate need for a reformation of its own, and it's about as old as Christianity was when the Reformation happened. So maybe something like that will happen, but it's just, it keeps people, especially with women, and it's pretty awful. Not in its practice on a day-to-day basis or in people's lives, but the way it subjugates societies. And I don't see that in Christian societies. So that's one major differentiator, in my opinion, that's worth calling out. And certainly, a state like Israel, which is a Jewish state, I think is thriving, even though it has, Judaism is, of course, interesting because it's both a culture and a religion, and there are lots of secular Jews. And I know a lot of them coming from Long Island, of course, and religious Jews too. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with religion. But in the West, with Christianity, I think that, well, here's what I think. I think that there's something evolutionarily in us that faith and belief and purpose work for us. And I don't know where it comes from, and I'm not nearly smart enough or educated enough to know, like, the idea of like object permanence and things coming back and having these cycles and the sun coming back up and needing to describe that, and then how that evolves into like a whole priesthood, and then that evolves into organized religion and so on and so forth. It's very interesting, and you can kind of see the linear path about how that happens. And I know Graham Hancock and others have talked about that, although some people think that stuff's pseudoscientific. Again, I'm not smart enough to know, but I say that because I think that if you replace, society needs to believe in something. And a society that doesn't believe in anything or have any shared mores or culture is not going to survive. And I think that the fall of Rome was kind of pushed over the edge by this, because, of course, what happened, it was agitating for hundreds of years since the beginning of Christianity. But what was it, in the 400s when Christianity became truly legal in Rome, in the Roman Empire? That's around the time that things started to really shake up and fall apart, as the old pagan traditions were dispelled and people didn't have common things to believe in or whatever, whether they're true or not. And clearly they both couldn't be true. The pantheon couldn't also exist alongside a monotheistic God. But so in my mind, I see people believing and like trans ideology, for instance, in society, in my opinion, that requires that seems to be very religious. Actually, it is religious. I mean, it has all the hallmarks of religion. Structure and holy books and belief and vaunted figures and sayings and faith. You have to just believe things that aren't true. You have to believe things you cannot see. You have to believe things that can't be proven with the scientific method or in any other way. And I bring that up not to pick on that movement, but to say, like, people will believe in something. So it's whether it's a sort of state religion like patriotism, which I think turns into nationalism and ultimately fascism, whether you have something like communism that's totally atheistic, but of course built upon deeply religious Marxist or Leninist whatever precepts, juste or whatever the hell they call that thing in North Korea, that communist system they have there. Or juche, that's what it's called. So it's interesting. I think religion's kind of a net neutral in the West. I think it's good people believe in something. I respect it. I wish I could believe in it. I don't look down on people for believing in God, any God. I don't think I'm smarter or better than them. I know people that believe in God that are smarter than me. David Jaffe asked me recently, a friend of mine who's on our show sometimes, how I feel about my dad's intellect. And he wasn't trying to insult him, but he's like, you respect and look up to your dad a lot, but he is a devout Catholic. So how do you square that? And I'm like, I kind of don't. Like, there's something in his brain that works for him, and there's something in my brain that doesn't for me. And if anything, I think he's smarter than I am. So it's a complicated issue, but I don't know that morality is outlined in biblical texts and whatever, but I don't think morality comes from religion. I think human nature, just like you see in dogs, just like you see in wolves, just like you see in fucking monkeys, like, they're not all beating the shit out of each other and killing each other because it's in their rational self-interest not to do that, at the very least. And so I think that order and all of those rules can come from somewhere else. And like when we were talking about AI and robotics and everything earlier, when we start dealing with all of those issues, religion is not going to be the question. In fact, these are the kinds of things that happen where you wonder how religion could be real at all. And predict for just the creation of consciousness. That's a godlike position. And so it's a complicated issue, but I don't know if that makes sense. But I think that's the way I kind of feel about it in an overarching way. Is I don't think I'm not offended by it like a lot of people are. Like when people it's like the 10 Commandments, I'm like, who gives a shit? I mean, I get it. But I'm equally disturbed, frankly, by civic shows of, like the flag everywhere. I'm watching a lot of playoff hockey. I love hockey. And it's like the fucking national anthem before every game. I'm like, why are we doing this? And I guess you got to give someone some shared stuff to believe in. But it's weird. It's all weird to me.
Mm-hmm. You touched on something that's very, very interesting right there. And it's something that I've heard a lot of people say is that if religion goes, or if Christianity goes, right, people will pretty much believe anything. I believe it was Chesterton that said, if someone believes in nothing, they'll believe in anything. And there's that link of, well, if you're not Christian, or if you're an atheist, if you're secular, if you're agnostic, you're just going to adopt more ideologies, right? Like, for lack of a better term, woke ideologies. I know you don't like saying that word, and I don't like saying it, but people know what we mean when we say
it's a descriptor. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've never been convinced by that argument. I'm convinced by the idea that people are predisposed to want to believe certain spiritual things. We have spiritual tendencies, I think, for good reasons. But the link to me that always made the most sense in terms of that is just being highly educated. I mean, overwhelmingly, the people who adopt such ideologies are college-educated people. And you see more and more and more churches also adopt these ideologies. And so to me, the clear link has always just been upper middle class, highly educated, most likely white. The reason why secularism gets thrown in there is because, well, if you're secular, you tend to also be more highly educated. So there's never been a clear link to me other than the idea of, well, if they don't believe in something, someone must believe in something, so it must be that. But I think to me the link has always been more clearly just being educated. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, therefore they're correct. I just mean that in the sense of, well, colleges have a certain set of viewpoints that they kind of only allow at this day and age. And so I think to me that has always been what made more sense. It could still 100% be true that secularism does lead to this, but to me it makes more sense, and it's a simpler explanation to say it's just better, people who are better educated. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think that's probably literally true. And because if you don't have a grasp the better your grasp is on the world, the better your grasp is on the holistic nature of knowledge, just knowing things, and then you're going to at least there's going to be more dice rolls. Like, the more you know, you're going to have to roll the dice every time. Like, do you still believe what you believe? Do you still know what you know? And if you literally just grow up on the farm, old school, 1850, grow up on the farm, you don't go within 10 miles of your house, the people in your community, you know what you know, you learn what you learn, and you believe what you believe. It's not even a matter of intellect. It is what you're saying, like literal education. And he could roll that dice in 1850 over and over and over again and still believe. But it's less likely. It augments it over and over again. And it's funny you say that, because it was my exposure to Catholic school that made me not believe. Because I was reading for the first time. I'd probably still be a practicing Catholic today. The thing that makes me not practicing is because I read the Bible. I really read it. Now, people in my family read it too, but I sat there and read it in Bible class every day. And I was like, wait, what? What? Wait, what? What? Like, over for years. And it was a problem. And where I left Catholic school after 8th grade, because I was like, I can't. This is nonsense. I basically came out as an atheist, so I was not even really allowed to be there. And in high school, when I was going to go to the next St. Thomas from St. Mary's, if anyone's curious, in New Hampshire. But so I think that's probably, I don't think it's probably, that's literally true. I mean, that has to be true. But again, it's people, I say this all the time on my show, because I'm not trying to gas anyone up. I'm just trying to let people, blue collar workers, people with just a high school education, community college, whatever, you matter. For some reason, you've been diminished by generations of people to make that have been made to believe that white collar work is like the end all be all. And I've said over and over again to my audience, like, the stupidest motherfuckers I ever knew in my entire life went to Northeastern, right, with me. And the smartest people I ever knew didn't go to college at all. And that is true. Probably 5 of the stupidest people and 5 of the smartest people in those things that I've ever met or encountered. And so I'm always loath to talk about my own education and my own experience having gone to a really good school, because I don't know that really mattered as much as, for this especially, as much as it mattered just my exposure to the good book as a Catholic on Long Island. And I also statistically, it's no doubt right, but I'm also the least educated person by literally in my immediate family. I with a bachelor's degree, I'm the least educated, because everyone has at least a master's degree in my siblings and my parents, and they're all devout. So it's like, I don't know what that means. If you put all of our paperwork next to each other, I'd be the least impressive. So there is that too, but that doesn't disprove. That's just my own experience. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. It's interesting, because one of the things that I hear a lot of people say is that this is it's ultimately a good argument for why we should maintain these Western Judeo-Christian values, is because otherwise they'll adopt these more dangerous ideologies. And I'm interested in hear what your thoughts are on this. This kind of goes into the topic of Islam, by the way, and reforming Islam. Armin Amabi, who's an ex-Muslim activist, will say that the reason he's against reforming Islam is because it's very condescending, where it's saying, well, here's, you're believing in this very dangerous BS. Here's this other BS that you should believe in instead, just because it's less dangerous to us. And that's basically how he views it. And I view it in a analogous way, a very similar way, in the argument of bringing back Judeo-Christian values to society, making sure that people on average are good Christians. It's just, well, this ideology is harmful, but here's this less harmful ideology that I don't need. I'm perfectly fine without it, but you clearly need it. And to me, it does come across as a bit disingenuous to try to structure society around what I perceive to be a falsehood, and maybe even a bit patronizing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that argument.
Yeah, it is an interesting argument, because I mean, I guess I take it as a given, and I haven't read too deeply about this, so I'd have to kind of look into what you were saying. But I take it as a given when you talk about the Reformation or the potential reformation of Islam, it has to come from within Islam. Christianity wasn't reformed from the outside; it was reformed from the inside. You know, with Lollards and all sorts. You know, and obviously with Luther and Calvin and everyone else, but that and all the councils that I mentioned earlier and all the things, like, it was constantly tested from the inside, not from the outside. I think what people are concerned about with Islam, from as far as I can tell, is that it doesn't, even though it has different sects that hate each other, that it doesn't seem to challenge, that, by the way, hate each other a lot more than Protestants and Christians, or Protestants and Catholics hated each other. Like, or at least as deeply at the very worst as it was in, let's say, Western Europe, post-Reformation. There were deep wars and alliances that lasted hundreds of years because of all these, not only with Luther, but with the Church of England and everything else. So and obviously Orthodoxy in the East. But I look at it and I see a situation where it's like, well, if the Reformation doesn't come from within, it's not a Reformation. It's like something else. If Islam, I have no problem with Islam in the main. I just don't think that the values that they're portraying in Islamically run countries, like theocratic dictatorships, basically, that doesn't sync with Western values. So that's something we have to call out immediately. It doesn't mean we can't trade with them. It doesn't mean you can't be friends with them, whatever. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, but I wouldn't personally be friends with them. But you do have to identify. It's like, well, this isn't how we do things. And it is a judgment call. And we are judging you. I mean, that's it, right? Like, you can't... This very conversation can get me killed, right? Like, you know, it's not going to, I don't think. But like this because a lot of people have these conversations, I'm not important enough to have a fucking jihad against or whatever.
Rushdie.
Yeah, like Rushdie, who they got. They got him. You know, like 40 years or something, like 35 years after the Satanic Verses. But it's like, to me, I look at it and I just think that if you want to be compatible with we have to look at the world and what we want to do, right? And as far as I can tell, we have like a few different spheres of influence. We have like the communist sphere of influence, which is growing substantially. We have the Islamic sphere of influence in the Middle East and parts of the subcontinent and elsewhere. And then you have like a kind of what I would call a Western sphere of influence. And those things are all vying for each other. What's interesting is they're all vying on different... One is vying on the level of society. One is vying on the level of political ideology. One is vying on the level of religion. So they're not even fighting with each other on the same... That's why it's all so chaotic. And so yeah, to the point of like an Islamic sort of like Protestant Islamic sect coming up or whatever, is like, we can't do that to them. That's like a form of colonialism. That doesn't work. And that's not what I'm talking about. So I personally don't see I don't see any sort of contradiction in that, because if it's Islamic people, Muslim people doing it to themselves, saying like, we need a different way forward, we need to interpret these texts in a different way, we need to treat women a different way, we need to treat gay people a different way, we need to treat, you know, non-believers and atheists and all these things a certain way, that hopefully that movement comes from within. Mm-hmm. And I think it will. Like, I think that style of life is untenable. And I think you're seeing it already. You're seeing what communist China did with kind of being like, well, we're basically a totalitarian capitalist society. We're not going to have any elections, and you guys have a better quality of life now, so everything's kind of okay, right? And in Saudi Arabia, you're seeing a similar situation, flush with petrodollars, and finally starting with by the billions and tens of billions, spread their money around, whether it's with Live Golf, whether it's with video games and their billions of dollars they're investing in video game publishers and all the rest, trying to normalize themselves. And we have to say like, whoa, wait a minute. You know, before we have this economic interface, we're not accepting the way you treat people. We're not accepting X, Y, and Z. And I think it's okay to say both of those things. I don't think the Islamic person is any smarter or stupider for believing in God than a Christian person. I personally think it's just a younger religion. I think that's all that explains it. And we're in like what, 1250 right now for Christianity? If you're Islam, you know, like if you date adjust them, 1250 was pretty fucking crazy in Europe, you know, because of Christianity, and then later Crusades and all the rest. So well, before and later. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm getting off the beaten path. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the way I feel about it. Is I don't see it as this sort of like patronizing thing, because we went through it. And by the way, Catholicism survived and thrived after that. It just had challenges for the first time, and it's good. It's good that that happened. I think that's the reason why. And it's also good that Christians basically get along with each other as if it doesn't matter. That it can't be understated that Protestants and Catholics killed each other by the hundreds of thousands and millions in Europe over hundreds of years, and there's nothing like that going on anymore. Not even close. So I think it's a sign for time to pass and hopefully peace to prevail after that.
Yeah. I often wonder if, mentioning the Reformation within Christianity, and then basically the dilution of Catholicism, and I often wonder if, in a way, the reason why it has changed is because it became less Catholic. It became less Christian. I believe it was Vatican II where they got together and they liberalized Catholicism to try to make it more, Mass is no longer in Latin. Mass now it can be in the vernacular. It was basically just to appease to a growing secular society, so that way people would stop leaving their church. And then you had, movies like The Exorcist come out to try to scare people to go back to the Catholic Church. And so with these sorts of reformations, I think it's true that they're reformed within the inside, but I think they would never have reformed within the inside if it weren't for pressure from the outside, from us judging them, from seeing, everyone else, society is changing, and people on the inside is seeing people on the outside live better lives. And I think in that sense, and also seeing, activists basically, championing ex-Muslims within these countries or reformed Muslims within these countries. I think, even though these reformations do come from the inside, it does ultimately stem from them seeing the outside, from kind of just leaving the cave or taking a glance outside the cave and seeing, the grass probably is greener on the other side. Otherwise, I'm not sure if these reformations ever would have taken place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair argument. It's also a fair argument to say that it took more than 1,000 years of consistent prodding of the church in different ways to finally buckle under some sort of power. And like I said, Lollardy is like the maybe the most prominent pre-Protestant thing, but it really goes back to way earlier than that. And so I think whatever happens is going to be a slow burn, but I think we have to figure out, as the West, in quotes, like, how do we want to interface with this world? We don't have to have, first of all, I'm a total isolationist, but also I'm not suggesting we need to send Marines into Riyadh and like liberate Saudi women. What I'm saying is, any more than we should have Marines in the ground at slave markets around, the Middle East and in Africa right now, just because it's like not reasonable for us to do those kinds of things. But we have to ask ourselves, much like the countries that have slave markets, much like the countries that deal in trafficking, much like the countries that are narco states, we have to ask ourselves, like, well, what kind of relationship do we really want with you? If this is the way you're going to treat people, if this is the way you're going to treat women, it's not even about 9/11 and all that kind of stuff. And our engagement in the Middle East was a total mistake. Maybe not in Afghanistan, but certainly in Iraq. And so it's like, I'm not interested in fighting. I'm not interested in doing any of that. We need to just figure out how we share the planet together. There's a lot of Muslims, a lot, and as Christians believe less and less and have fewer and fewer babies, it seems like maybe the exact opposite is happening in the Islamic world then. So it's just it's just a challenge we have to ask ourselves, because it is not compatible with the mores of the United States. It's not to say, I live in a neighborhood here in Virginia. One of my neighbors, they're Muslim. They wear, full covering, and that's their prerogative. The point is that no one should force you to do that, And by the way, when I see them mowing their lawn during the summer, I like feel so bad, and I want to be like, do you want me to do it? Like, do you want me to help you here? Because it's probably really hot under there, So as long as you're making choices, I guess that's what I'm saying. And that's what's great about the United States and other Western countries, is you can make a choice. Islam hasn't taken off in the United States. There's only a couple million Islamic people, I think, in the United States, right? So, which is weird, because it's so huge. The religion is huge and the country's huge. But I think there is some sort of incompatibility with it if you want to live a truly Western lifestyle or a truly, Islamic Sharia lifestyle, let's say. And so I don't think it's not like it is a value judgment, of course, but it's not, because you're not trying to say like, don't do it. Don't live your life the way it's like, whatever, man, do what you want. But again, we need to figure out how we interact in this new global reality. And I hope that we can all kind of come to an agreement that at the very least, people deserve equal treatment under the law. Like, if we can't believe on that basic precept, then we have a lot of problems with each other, I think. And so if we can begin there, I think that'll be really positive. But we're not there. That's the sad reality. And what we don't talk about, that's not there. You can get beheaded in Mecca right now for having drugs on you. You can also get beheaded in Mecca for not believing in God. You know, or cheating on your wife, or doing a whole host of things. And they'll cut your hands off in Indonesia I think that's still true for a host of drug offenses. And we just don't, it just seems we have to draw the line somewhere, like with humane treatment. And that's it. And it's not a colonialism, because if you don't want to do that, then that's cool. Just do what you want to do, I guess, but we don't have to interact with it.
Yeah, I mean, as the world gets more and more interconnected, these are questions that we're going to have to deal with. And I don't think it's as simple as saying, well, you know, let them live the way they want to live, because at the end of the day, as you said, well, if they're forced to live that way, and even though they're saying that they like to live that way, how do we even, like, they kind of have to answer in such a way. So I think these are just going to be pressing questions that we're going to have to ask ourselves and debate more and more as time moves on, because we're getting more connected, whether we like it or not.
Sure. I mean, it goes back to the Thomas Friedman book from 20 years ago, right? The World is Flat. I love that book. And that book was really prescient and interesting about how these connections are going to become multifaceted, myriad, infinite in nature. And I personally, I foresee a more peaceful future once we get past these different things that are separating us right now. And I personally don't like the cravenness of why certain things happen and certain things don't. Like, we're involved, we're very involved in what's going on in Ukraine, for better or for worse, but as an example. But you would think that, wouldn't we want to like economically strangle Saudi Arabia for what they're doing to people, like doing to Yemen, but they're doing to Yemen with our weapons. So of course we're helping them. Plus what they do to their women and gay people and trans people and all sorts of other things there. But it's like, no, they're cool. They got oil. And everyone's like, oh, okay. And we all know that that's the reason why we turn the other cheek. But we don't even, it's kind of like Chris and I were joking on Sacred Symbols. It's like, we all know our phones are listening to us. We all know it. We all know that they're listening to us and tracking us and giving us ads. And we're all like, yeah, it's fine. It's a very similar thing. Like, we all just know. And I think that we should just ask ourselves, like, what's the cost of us doing business here? How are we? Live Golf, I brought up earlier, was like a big thing. I was so pleased. I don't know if you know anything about that, but do you know anything about Live Golf? LIV?
Is that basically the Saudi Arabia funded golf?
Yeah, it's like the Saudi Arabian PGA rival, but they were courting people by giving them extraordinary amounts of money, like magnitudes more than you would make on the tour. And some people took it, and a lot of people were like, fuck you. I'd rather make $1 million a year on the PGA Tour than make $10 million playing in Saudi Arabia, playing on this, using this blood money or whatever. So people know, they already know, they just haven't tested yet. And I say to people in gaming all the time, when you see Tencent is another nefarious, not Muslim, but communist organization, and they're trying to launder themselves too. I mean, the whole gaming brand Level Infinite is Tencent trying to not act like they're Tencent. It's like Level Infinite. When you see publishers, it's like, well, that's CCP.
Yeah.
The CCP has golden shares in Tencent. I don't want to hear any more about that. So,
I think this is a good place to end it. We're coming up on the hour, but Mr. Moriarty, I want to thank you for you graciously joining me for this conversation. I think this conversation was great, and I always love hearing what you have to say. I've been a big fan of yours for quite some time, and I implore everyone to go check out Last Stand Media, host a podcast on there, as well as follow Colin on Twitter, even though he doesn't tweet that much. Still give him a follow. But Mr. Moriarty, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. Congratulations on your new place. You were telling me about it briefly before we began, and I'm always happy to talk about politics and religion and all these complicated things, knowing that it's all fluid and that we're all kind of figuring it out as we go is fun to me. it's both serious and not that serious, where I feel like people should be able to talk about serious things, but be able to kind of have like a stream of consciousness or get there. And I think conversations like this are helpful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, of course. And right back at you. And I hope you have a great day of mowing the lawn.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to go do that now.